welcome to today's Computer Side Chat, where we will be talking about political parties. So to this point, we have focused on the American political culture in the sense of talking about political socialization, where do your political ideas come from, and we've talked about political ideologies. The three main ones in the United States being liberalism, conservatism, and those who fall in the middle of those two ideologies, who we refer to as moderates. So now we want to talk about how those ideologies unite behind one banner or as one group. And those groups are referred to as political parties. So let's go ahead and jump into that in a little bit more depth. All right, so what is a political party? I kind of already gave you the definition to that, but to give you a more formal definition, a political party is a group of people who share similar beliefs about how the government should be run and how the issues facing our country should be solved. So in other words, it's a way for like-minded people to come together as a unified front to influence the government or influence the direction our country takes. That's the entire purpose of a political party. The two main parties within the United States are the Democrats and the Republicans. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. So a big part of political parties is delivering a unified message to convince people to join your cause or to get behind your party and to vote for the members of the party. And so one way that these political parties deliver that message is through something called their platform. And a party platform is a set of easy to understand statements that describe the party's views about complex issues. So it is a broad number of statements describing what the party thinks. Each of those individual statements or individual stances on issues are known as a plank. So each plank represents the party's stance on one issue. You put all those planks together, that makes up the party's platform. So let's give an example of a Republican Party plank. So the Republican Party under Donald Trump going into the 2016 election, part of their platform said that they wanted to renegotiate American trade deals to keep jobs in the United States. Now, trade negotiations, trade deals are really complicated, really complex things. And keeping jobs in America and keeping companies from taking those jobs out of the United States is also a really complicated and complex issue. But the average person can understand, hey, we want to change our trade deals so that jobs stay here and more people are employed. That's a simple to understand statement that people can get behind. And so that is one of the planks in the Republican platform. Before we start talking about the Republican and Democratic parties in detail, let's talk about the different party systems that we can see in a representative democracy. Here in the United States, we have a two-party system, and I'll talk about that in a second. However, that is not the only type of democracy using political parties that a country can use. So one type of party system would be the one-party system. Under a one-party system, there is one major political party. These countries tend to not actually be democracies because there's only one party you can vote for. This system tends to be present in countries that have a dictatorship. So, for example, China. China has a dictatorship, but they want to give the appearance of having democracy. Yes, technically in China may vote, but there is a one party that they can actually vote for. So it's truly not democracy because there isn't really choice. Next is the party that we use, which is the two-party system. So this contains two major political parties. There may be other smaller political parties that people can vote for, but the majority of the time, elections are going to be won by one of two parties within the system. And again, that is what we use here in the United States. The two major political parties here in the U.S. are the Republicans and the Democrats. Lastly is a multi-party system. And this is a system where people can vote for two or more major parties. Now, representative democracies that use a multi-party system tend to be different from the system that we use. So, for example, we vote for individual candidates within a party. So, for example, in the presidential election, you either voted for Hillary Clinton, the Democratic nominee, or Donald Trump, the Republican nominee. Whereas in countries that use multi-party systems, you are voting for the party itself. So you would just go to the polls and you would vote for Party A, or Party B, or Party C. And then rather than it being winner take all, so for example, Donald Trump won the election, so Donald Trump became president. In a multi-party system, the amount of control you get in the government is decided by the percentage of the vote you got. So if your party got 20% of the vote, you get 20% of the seats in Congress. If you got 51% of the vote, you get 51% of the seats in the legislative branch, and so on and so forth. So multi-party systems tend to be used by European democracy. So, for example, Britain uses a multi-party system. Germany, France also use multi-party systems. Lastly, how do political parties influence government? In other words, what's the point of having a political party? Why are they a good thing to have? And why do they help influence government? Well, number one, they nominate candidates. So we've talked about the nomination process, caucuses and primaries, the way that political parties choose their candidates or nominees for a political office. So it's a way of organizing that nominating process and to get the name and face of people out there that are looking to run for office. Number two, they influence policy, or the decisions made by government and the laws made by government. If you have a unified front, if you have a party that can very much give a loud voice to the people, that voice can influence the direction a country takes. Third, it unites government. So again, you don't have 300 million people with 300 million differing opinions and different desires for how government should work. You have united groups that can present a united single front for what should be done. Fourth, it creates balance. By having two or more political parties, you're balancing each other out. So one group doesn't get everything they want because the other group will always be there to balance them out or challenge their ideas or challenge the direction they want to take the country in. And lastly, they're good for informing citizens. They tell citizens what is going on. They talk to citizens about how a law will affect them or how something the government did will affect them and why that's a good or bad thing. All right, so that wraps up talking about parties in general. Let's jump into our two specific parties. Let's start with the Democrats. So first off, the ideology that the Democrats follow, to put it in terms we understand, is liberalism. The Democratic Party is the liberal party of the United States. Let's talk a second about what the Democratic platform is as well. And we're going to focus on the 5 main planks within the Democratic platform. This isn't everything, but this tends to be the 5 things that they talk about the most. Number 1 is a fair economy. So this means that the economy should work to the benefit of everyone, not just, say, rich people or rich business owners. This really kind of falls in line with the liberal belief that government should work to the benefit of the people, or that government's main job is to protect people. Liberals tend to feel the same way about the economy. So what are some things liberals want that would create a fair economy? Well, number 1, they want an increase in the minimum wage. So the Democrats have started pushing for a $15 minimum wage. Pay people in minimum wage jobs a living wage, enough for them to make a living off their job. Another way you might promote a fair economy is through regulation of businesses. So saying that businesses can and cannot do certain things. They have to pay you overtime if you go over 40 hours. That's an example of another way Democrats feel a fair economy is created. Number 2, Democrats want to promote equality. One way they might want to promote equality, and to back up, when we talk about promoting equality, if that's not obvious, it's making sure that everyone in the United States is equal regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, beliefs, so on and so forth. So one way Democrats might promote equality is you should have the right to get married to someone of the same gender. So in other words, gay marriage should be legal. That's something Democrats want to protect. You shouldn't have your religious beliefs infringed upon. So one way that Democrats promote equality is they are very big on what we would call separation of church and state. Lastly, they would also push for things that help out minority groups. So like affirmative action, which helps more minorities get into the workforce. Third, Democrats are pushing for affordable college. You may have heard people like Hillary Clinton talk about debt-free college or tuition-free college. As college costs get more expensive, Democrats want to reduce the cost of college. They want to make it easier for young people like you to go to college if that's something you want to do. 4, Democrats want to raise taxes on the wealthy. I believe we've talked about in class that a big issue within the United States is our ever-growing debt, and how are we going to pay for that debt? The Democrats believe that a big way we should try to pay for that is by raising taxes on wealthy individuals and wealthy businesses. Make them pay what we would call their fair share. And number 5, fight global warming. So Democrats believe that global warming is one of the biggest problems facing the United States and facing the world in general, and therefore we should pass regulations that fight global warming, that prevent companies from producing a lot of pollution, and that align with the scientific ideas on how to fight global warming. So those are the main planks of the Democratic platform. All right, so now let's talk about the Republican Party. And the Republican Party are also known as the GOP, or the Grand Old Party. Now, the Republicans obviously are the conservative party to the Democrats' liberalism. So they follow the conservative ideology. So what are the main planks of the Republican platform? And again, this is 5 planks that I'm picking and choosing that I feel they emphasize the most. It certainly does not make up the majority of the Republican platform. So number 1, the Republicans believe in constitutional originalism. In other words, they believe that we should follow the Constitution to the letter as it was written. We shouldn't try to figure out, well, how would the framers of the Constitution interpret this part if they were around today? No. They wrote it the way they wrote it, so that's the way we should follow it. So, for example, when it comes to the Second Amendment, Republicans believe that any regulations put on owning guns is a violation of the Second Amendment. That you are going against the original intent of the guys that wrote the Constitution, and therefore you should keep our laws and our ways of purchasing guns the way they are. So stick to the Constitution as it is. Don't try to read into things or try to figure out, how would James Madison have felt about this if he were still alive today? No, stick to what is written on the page. Number 2, and of course this really falls in line with the conservative ideology, is conservatives believe that we should limit government. Specifically, that we should limit federal government. The federal government should have less power. So what are some ways that the Republicans want to limit government? Well, they want to strip away some federal regulations on businesses, so they don't want government to have as much of a say in the economy. And they also maybe want to slash some federal departments, so they might want to get rid of the Department of Education or the Environmental Protection Agency. Get rid of some of these government oversight departments that expands federal power. Furthermore, they also want to limit government because the bigger government is, the more money it costs. I talked about with the Democrats, their way for dealing with our increasing debt is to increase the amount of money that the government brings in. The Republicans believe the opposite. They believe the best way to handle our debt is to reduce the amount of money that our government spends. And so by limiting government, by cutting away pieces of the federal government, you're limiting the amount of money spent. Third, Republicans believe in cutting taxes. They believe that if you make a certain amount of income, you should get the majority of that income. Furthermore, we think that cutting taxes on businesses means that you're helping the economy. By giving businesses more money, that's more money that they can spend on their employees and on employees' paychecks. So cut taxes. People and businesses should not be paying a lot in taxes. Fourth, they want to control immigration. Obviously, the most visual idea when it comes to, or the most well-known idea when it comes to controlling immigration right now was Donald Trump's desire to build a wall on the U.S.-Mexican border. Beyond that, controlling immigration to Republicans is all about making sure that people coming into the country are doing it legally and aren't going to harm U.S. citizens. The two biggest issues with immigration then are limiting illegal immigration, so specifically from Mexico, limiting the number of illegal immigrants that are coming in from Mexico, and also Syrian refugees. So we should limit the number of refugees that are allowed to come into the United States from Syria. The Republican idea behind that is that we don't know if some of these Syrians might be terrorists in disguise, and we're putting ourselves in jeopardy by letting too many in. So they want to control and limit immigration. Lastly, and this connects back to limiting government, Republicans want to repeal Obamacare. They want to get rid of the health care law passed by Obama during his presidency. They want to get rid of Obama's health care plan, and they want to replace it with something different. That's been a big goal of the Republicans ever since Obamacare was passed, and so that is something that they are going to continue to try to do and push for and replace. So that is your quick rundown on political parties in the United States. I know that was a lot of information at once. We are going to spend the next 2 days in class going over this. So we'll talk about political parties a bit more, what they are, what's their function, as well as some of the independent small parties within the United States. And then we're going to take a deeper look at the party platforms of the Republicans and the Democrats and see what's in there and try to piece together some of their ideas. Make sure you fill out your notes entirely, and from here, go take the quizzes. Have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow.